The South African Jewish Board of Deputies has called on government to reject what it calls a politically biased and discriminatory calls to break off ties with Israel.
It says government should instead find ways to re-engage in the Middle East region through maintaining open channels of communications with all parties. Their call comes after International Relations Minister and ANC NEC member Lindiwe Sisulu said yesterday that steps are underway to downgrade South Africa's embassy in Israel.
Speaking to the SABC earlier, the ANC Chairperson of the International Relations Subcommittee, Lindiwe Zulu, says there's no going back on this issue as it was the party's conference resolution last year, December.
The vision of the ANC was at the 54th conference was that we have to downgrade our embassy to that of a liaison office as a form of protest towards what was happening in Israel, and also as a form of protest that the issue of Palestine and the war that continues there is something that is not very good, and also even the aggression by Israel, including the fact that we have been calling for a two-state solution, and the discussions around even getting to that is very difficult. This is a conference resolution. We will implement that resolution. We started implementing that resolution already. We've recalled our ambassador back, and as Minister Lindiwe Sisulu was explaining at the briefing that there are phases to the withdrawal. We've already started with the first phase of withdrawing our ambassador. We no longer have an ambassador in Israel.
So talking about aggression, some have called out America's vice president for saying and echoing pretty much what Donald Trump, the president, has said, is that Russia's presence in Caracas is a declaration of war somewhat because it crossed into the Western Hemisphere. And I'd like to find out from you as a party, what are your thoughts on how this conflict ought to be resolved?
This conflict would have been resolved a long time ago had we had willing partners to have a conversation and discuss and agree on whatever resolutions of the United Nations that were taken, that they need to be implemented. One. Two, this conflict would also have been resolved if Israel was not having such an aggression. It is unbelievable that you saw that the EU, for instance, made a statement itself because they believe that what Israel was doing in as far as the Golden Heights and so forth are concerned, it is not correct. This conflict would have been resolved if we had willing partners, as we always understand from ourselves as South Africa. We have always been willing, by the way, to make sure that there is some discussion, and we've always been willing to even listen to Israel itself.
We're now joined in studio by the Vice President of the South Africa Jewish Board of Deputies, Zev Krengel. Mr. Krengel, a very good evening to you and welcome to the group. First of all, what's your reaction to South Africa's decision to downgrade the embassy in Israel?
So look, we still feel that she hasn't the right to downgrade. How we understand it was a decision made at ANC conference, then has to go to Parliament, then has to go to Cabinet, and then it becomes SA policy. That's how we understand as South African citizens. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I don't understand the legal way government works. She's come out with a statement. We've always been hugely against it. We feel when President Ramaphosa spoke to the community at the Garden Shul at our conference, he said South Africa wants to make a positive engagement with both sides, wants to be the Mandela, wants to see. Unfortunately for South Africa, the only thing we have left to offer the world is what Mandela offered the world 25 years ago. Today we have nothing else. We literally on borrowed money, we nearly at junk status. Israel's a superpower economically. It's unbelievably friendly with all our BRIC friends. Brazil's just been to Jerusalem, met at the Wailing Wall with Netanyahu. Netanyahu's just been to Moscow, met with Putin, who helped get bodies back for the Israeli soldiers. A Russian troop was actually injured in that. That's the level of, and then of course Netanyahu's biggest friend sits in the White House. Our three biggest trading partners being Europe, North America and China. I just don't think it's clever business for South Africa. And for me, the saddest part as a Jewish South African is the South African government doesn't behave like this with any other country. So it doesn't behave like this with Saudi Arabia. It doesn't behave like this when it's done any Syria, even in. They never did it with Zimbabwe. They never did it with any other country. And for me, that's the upsetting part. The upsetting part is there seems to be a different standard, what the minister's saying, for the Jewish state to the rest of the world. So atrocities happen in Myanmar, they're happening all over the world. South Africa does never downgrade. The only embassy The problem what the minister is not understanding the ramifications for us as South Africans. It's literally a small dog taking on a big dog. And if the other dog bites,
if you so profess that Israel is indeed a superpower, what kind of prejudice would the Israeli people be suffering as a result of this decision?
So look, I really don't think it's going to affect the Israelis at all. I don't think they know it's happening. What I've always said, for Israel society, South Africa's tumbleweed. We don't really care. Prime Minister Netanyahu has done 3 visits into Africa. Our own regions aren't even listening to us. I mean, Chad, which is a Muslim-based country in Africa, has joined. Rwanda has just opened an embassy. Kenya, all of African nations are getting closer to Israel. Israel helps them with technology, they help them with poverty alleviation, they help them with water, they help them continuously. Israel's happy to help the whole of Africa. We're the only country that says, no, we don't need help. 27% unemployment, people living under the poverty line, horrific poverty, but no, we don't need Israel's technology. We want to hold a moral high ground that President Mandela wouldn't even hold, because Mandela was about talking to both sides. Whenever we have helped a conflict, whether it's been in Ireland, whether it's been in Sri Lanka, whether it's been in Burundi, we have spoken to all sides. But when it comes to the Jewish state, somehow the minister thinks she doesn't have to speak to the most powerful side. And what she's not understanding, Israel's allies today can hurt South Africa. Literally, if they want to do it, they can make South Africa a living nightmare. We add no value but what Mandela taught us in '94, and that's 25 years ago.
Let's talk about the basis of the decision. I mean, President Cyril Ramaphosa said government's approach to this decision is informed by the ongoing violation of the rights of the Palestinian people, ostensibly by Israel.
So look, first of all, it's a complicated conflict. And we have always supported a 2-state solution. The irony is the Jewish Board of Deputies and the Jewish community must probably do more for the Palestinian people than anyone else in South Africa. Because we continuously tell the Israelis that you need to negotiate, you need to talk, you need to try and come to some type of settlement. There seems to be a peace process, there seems to be a peace plan which the American administration is going to be unveiling after the Israeli elections, which is tomorrow. And hopefully that will give the rights of the Palestinians to self-determination, and we support that. Our view is that our current government is playing it extremely incorrectly. They have to engage on both sides, because Israel needs us for nothing. We need Israel and America and Israel's friends, which is Russia, India and Brazil, and China for that matter. We need them a lot more than Israel, and by trying to undermine Israel and say we're going to downgrade the embassy, it doesn't affect Israel, and Israel can hurt us more. The only thing we have is to show what we did 25 years ago. But unfortunately, the Mandela shine is not there anymore, and we need the world more than the world needs us today.
The Jewish Board of Deputies say this decision will be inconsistent with how South Africa conducts its foreign policy, particularly when it comes to negotiations. Now, Israel has been refusing to bring the Palestinian officials to the negotiation table. So this is very much inconsistent.
So that's absolutely incorrect. I mean, first of all, you're just watching Libya, looking at Sudan, looking at Venezuela. South Africa always says we talk to all sides. That's always been the way we have made peace. You never cut off a side. You can't cut your hand off and then want to shake the other side. So first of all, with the horrific violations, what's happening all over the world, the South Africans said we must always talk to other sides. Second of all, our view is the violations, if you go back into the history, I mean, there was the Oslo Accord, which literally the Palestinians walked away from, and it's a complicated scenario. And as I said, I'm not getting into the nitty-gritty who's at fault. Are the Palestinians not to come to the negotiation table? Prime Minister Netanyahu says he's always offered to meet with President Mahmoud Abbas. They always said, all what we have to do, or what we as children of Mandela is to go there and say, guys, keep talking, because there is no point in trying to blame the one with the other. It's a complicated conflict that's been going for 2,000 years. It almost looks impossible. I truly believe there is a way out of it. I truly pray and hope, and I'm telling you now, there will be a peace process. It will be signed on the White House lawns. That's where it will be signed. The sad thing for me as a South African, we will not have a seat even in the audience when that peace process is signed. And that is thanks to our current government not understanding where the world is moving. And they have to understand the world is a very different world to what it was 25 years ago, 30 years and 40 years ago. Our real enemy in this country is unemployment and poverty, and that's what we have to focus on. And this inconsistency between going for the Jewish state is just going to make South African government harder to help its own people.
I suppose Israel is to date still battling to fend off reports of apartheid and racism. As a matter of fact, just a couple of years ago, the United Nations published a report accusing Israel of imposing an apartheid regime of racial discrimination on the Palestinian people. I mean, considering that South Africa is also from a dark history of apartheid, it's correct to say that South Africa is probably justified in having come up with this decision.
So look, we totally disagree. I totally disagree. If you understand the conflict, I mean, Arab Israelis live in Israel with full rights. They've got they can vote. They live as the best Arabs in the Middle East. And unfortunately, South Africa is not understanding where the world's going. I mean, the Arab world is getting closer to Israel. Oman's invited Israel. Saudi Arabia is doing overtures. Everyone's doing overtures. The single most important person in the current Israeli-Hamas conflict is Egypt, it's in Africa. Why is Egypt doing? Egypt has saved thousands of lives in the last 2 years because Egypt has stepped up to the plate and said we will talk to both sides and we'll be an honest broker. South Africa say no, all the blame's on one side, no blame on the other side, and we're irrelevant. I must say I'm proud to be an African because Egypt's making a real difference and they've saved lives. I mean the three negotiated ceasefires which we have had between Gaza and Israel, which was touch and go to all-out war, thanks to Egypt. And I thank Egypt as a fellow African. As a South African, I'm extremely sad to see, as the son of Mandela, how little we have done to stop the deaths on both sides.
Mr. Krengel, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you on the show this evening. We appreciate your time. That was the Vice President of the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, Zev Krengel. This is The Globe on SABC News. We shall bring you more news in just a moment.